to find. Channel the will to find. Channel. Channel the will to find. Channel the will to find. Channel the will to find.
Okay, so when the camera turns on, you're going to see a little light right here. Okay. So if you think you need to.
I do my hair toss, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Hair toss, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Ooh, child, tired of the bullshit. Gone
Kara, how do you pronounce your name? Is it Kara or Kara?
It's Kara. Hi, Liz.
Kara, I just wanted to make sure when I introduced you. All right, thanks, Kara.
Sure. Hey, do you want me to put on my video or leave it?
You can leave it off for now.
Okay.
Tim's going to hand it over to us at 10:30, and then I'll do some introductions here, and we can all turn our videos on at 10:30.
Oh, so this starts at 10:30 or
at 10? Yeah, it does
okay.
start at 10. Yeah. Tim's going to start with a few introduction pieces, and then we'll start. Yep.
Perfect. Thanks, Liz.
Baby, how you feeling? Don't you ever miss me when you're gone off the side lanes. Hear the cars on the street, all we need. Hear the screaming in the silence. All the lights low. Don't you ever miss me when your dark sky turns low. Wake up, honey, love, come on, soul. Wake up, honey, love, come on, soul. Curl out at night, straight to rose in this lingering. July night, standing on 45 and low. It was getting hot there. You were so easy, then it's fading so. Don't you ever miss me when your daytime turns to blue. Wake up, honey, love, come on, soul. Wake up, honey, love, come on, soul.
Why can't I hear?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and I apologize for the momentary technical difficulties in getting this, getting the PowerPoint up. It's a tricky thing sometimes to make your cursor move in just the right way to get the video started. So I'm hoping that everyone can hear me, and I'm trusting that I will get a chat notification or someone will text me if you can't hear me. At this point, I'm not able to turn a video on. I will try again now. It looked like something just blipped on the screen. So you may not be able to see me today, but I'm welcoming you here from my home office. I'm Tim Moore, and I am part of the team at the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota, involved in organization-wide positive supports training. And I am here to welcome you today to the 2022 Collaborators Forum. It's been too long since we've done this all kind of in one fell swoop. You know, it's been since 2019 since we've all been together in one place, even virtually. And we're really hopeful that this time next year we'll be together in person. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that looked in 2019 and kind of the direction that we were headed in making this event accessible to people across the state in their own context and with people who are working in close proximity to them. So we'll get started here with a bit of an introduction about the forum for the next 30 minutes, and then we'll turn it over to Liz Hari-Dennis, who will moderate our first session of the day. So again, welcome. So why do we have this network? It's been quite a while since we talked about it, and I'm sure that many of you are new to the network and participating in this network event for the first time. And so the coordinated and collaborative approach to positive behavior support provides us a way to promote a common language for PBS implementation that's shared by all our members across organizations, across state agencies, across the universities who are part of our network. And we can understand each other when we talk about fidelity of implementation and outcome data for the training and technical assistance that we provide. And when we talk about a systems approach involving 3 tiers of implementation, promoting quality of life across the lifespan, we share more similarities than differences, so we can focus on the universal PBS core features that apply to layers of support across settings, contexts, and professional disciplines. As a result, people in Minnesota have an effective framework to increase skills and address challenges by supporting change in ways that are individually grounded and highly relevant to their natural support systems in terms of their values and capacities. Founding member Hope Beisel encouraged this network to be about the transition points and recognition that we can all learn from each other. The value in connecting PBS across the lifespan and across settings is hard to measure. And if we came together as a collection of people who work in the community with adults or people who work in school settings with children, and we didn't have intentional crosstalk and we didn't talk about the transition points from early childhood into school, from school into that transition age, from transition age into adult services, and then aging services as we get older in life, then there's lack of continuity. Then it's harder to achieve a life trajectory for a person that looks as good as it can look in the vision that they have for that life. And that was the challenge that Hope issued to us when we first were getting together, is this network has to be about the transition points. As difficult as that is to make these conversations relevant for everybody who comes to them and the different perspectives that they bring and the different settings they work in and the different professional training that they have, sitting inside of these transition points and raising them up and talking about them has been such an important part of our network since its founding. So we have quite a history of PBS in Minnesota. Currently, the state defines the term positive support as evidence-based practices that are person-centered, culturally responsive, and data-based in nature. Positive behavior support is one type of positive support practice that emphasizes establishing proactive environments for people while promoting social and emotional skill development. Our network is addressing gaps in research to practice across sectors and a historical tendency to dilute attention away from empirically supported practice when new socially valuable frameworks emerge, by working collaboratively to expand PBS using implementation science as a foundational principle. So you can see here that in 2004, the Minnesota Department of Education started their still going strong work in school-wide positive behavioral interventions and supports. We're going to hear a little bit more about that and an update on their current work from Aaron Farrell towards the end of this half hour here. We started this network in 2016. We had our petition approved by the Association for Positive Behavior Support as a network. And we are a network that's kind of unique among the networks under APBS. And we're unique because of how many different kinds of disciplines and practice settings and how broadly across the lifespan our members are working. And that's not common across APBS networks. And so the way that we do our work here, our interagency, our collaborative approach is instructive, has been instructive for other networks across the APBS family. And so we formed in 2016. We completed a path, and we'll show you a little bit about that in a few moments. In 2017, we launched our social media work that's still going strong. We interface with the Olmsted-driven statewide planning team, and that work continues. And we had our first what we call a gathering before it became the Collaborators Forum. So more on that in a little bit too. And then our work continued in 2018. We expanded our social media presence and continued to gain reach throughout the state. And then in 2019, we completed a new path, and we're about to reevaluate that path and see where we're at in 2022. So we've been connecting with people across the state. We have wonderful organizational partners who have come into our sphere along the way. Just amazing people and organizations that have made this network what it is. So in 2016, at our formation, we wondered, where would we be in 3 years? We went through a wonderful path process that Betsy Gadboy and Stacy Danoff helped us to work through. And at the end of those 3 years, we said, well, where are we now? And we had a lot more people having joined the network. We were using our technology, our social media, to encourage remote attendance and connection among our members. We had formed some exemplary communities in the state. We were working at that point, having had 3 collaborators forums and knowing that we had a kind of a format for annual getting together that really was kind of moving our intentions forward and getting folks to be together and learn from one another and cross talking, which was wonderful. And we completed another path. We thought we were going to be here in 2021 with an APBS conference that would be able to showcase kind of the robustness of the work that we had done. But of course, APBS 2021 in Minneapolis didn't happen, and so that was kind of a bummer. But we moved ahead and thought about where we're still going, and recognizing that we have a conference in 2026 that will be a wonderful showcase for the work that we're doing here. And we continued on during the pandemic, and a little bit more about that as we talk. So here's a picture of the 2019 path. At our path that's planned for later in 2022, we'll revisit these goals and what was positive and possible in these 3 years through the pandemic, and where we're going to go in the lead up to 2026 in the APBS conference that's going to come here. It's really going to happen this time. I think in 4 more years, we're all confident that we're going to be gathering here in Minneapolis. So we have been sharing about our network's efforts over the past few years in a few different ways. This piece in the APBS newsletter in 2019 is about the history of positive behavior support in Minnesota and the development of our network and what we accomplished in our first few years. And as a side note, all newsletters and the Journal of Positive Behavior Interventions is free to APBS members. So there's a perk of membership that we can point out right here. This next piece was written in 2021, published in 2021, and that highlights what PBS practitioners in Minnesota experienced and accomplished during the pandemic. And finally, this piece here in 2020 appeared in the newsletter of the Minnesota chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And this accompanies a brochure that we developed to hand to pediatricians and others describing what PBS is and some basics of how to start using it. And I'll show you a link to our resources page here in a little while through MNPSP.org, where this and other resources can be found. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about our network structure here next. So we have a leadership team. We call it the Network Leadership Team, or the NLT, and we meet quarterly. We've been meeting quarterly for the past several years, and we have three main working groups: our marketing and social media team, our event planning team, and what we call our exemplary communities team. Of course, if you're interested in finding out more about any of these teams, please do get in touch with us. We'd be happy to have you come and join, come and see what they're all about. Check out the work, join the work. Your energy and your ideas are always, always welcome. And we have a membership that's very robust. We have 664 members as of the other day, and the general membership stays informed about training and networking opportunities and other news. You get emails from us. Active members are those that have selected into committing to one of those three working groups, perhaps our network leadership, and doing this work in collaboration with other active members that furthers the work of the network. And then finally, our leaders are committed to active responsibilities and then participating in leadership activities and dedicate the time to collaborate with others who steer the organization. One of the things that APBS is doing over these last couple of years is challenging networks to look critically at our membership and our connection with diverse communities, asking us to identify what are we doing now and how can we improve. So each year, our network and others submit annual reports to APBS, and we answer certain questions that they ask us. And one question has been specifically about this: at who is in your leadership group, who is in your membership, what are you doing to increase the diversity of people who are involved in your network? Here's what we said. This is a lot on a screen. I tend not to want to put a lot of text on a screen, but I wanted to make sure that you're able to see what we said in November 21 in our report to APBS. And by the way, this set of slides and the others that you'll see today are available on our conference page on our website. We said that network communications and invitations to participate in network events are directed across urban and rural school districts and service providers working across population settings in the lifespan. To date, we have not engaged in targeted recruitment of Black, Indigenous, and persons of color representatives. We identified the need to diversify our members in a public message on June 5th of 2020, following the killing of George Floyd and the demonstrations that increased awareness of longstanding systemic inequities that require a long-term priority for necessary change to the social, health, and educational systems that maintain disparities in Minnesota. That message is linked on our website as well. This included an invitation to inform how our network is thinking and acting with regard to racial justice, which needs to be driven by equity for people of color and with the application of evidence-based practices that are grounded in science to nurture our civic, societal, medical, educational, and human services systems. We understand that to address the issues in our society today, we must work towards diversifying our members. So currently, 17% of our leadership identify as representing a minoritized group. And right now, we don't know, of our 664 members, what's our baseline level of diversity. So those of you who registered for this event today encountered a series of questions that were designed to help us establish this baseline. We need your involvement in network leadership. We need you as an active member as we work this year and ongoingly to establish a plan to embed strategies for addressing equity and cultural responsiveness within all of our network activities and goals. All right, now I'll tell you a little bit about each of the work groups and what we're up to here in the next, hopefully, 7 minutes. So the Exemplary Communities Work Group highlights quality implementation of PBS in regions across the state. So we're interested in celebrating the excellent PBS support or PBS that's implemented in Minnesota, sharing ideas and strategies and collaborating across agencies and helping people to reach out and learn more about PBS in their region. So connecting people who are doing great work. There's certainly a summary of these activities and efforts on our website that you can check out. This is, again, a lot of text and is just a sample of a document that we've been working on. And this is at tier 1. And there's tiers 2 and 3 as well. But what I wanted to make sure that I showed you very briefly here was that this is the way that we've been thinking about how we're identifying key transition points in early childhood, K-21 services, and adult services, and some of the ways that we're looking at exemplary practice and how to connect those practices across transition points. And so these major bullets that are bolded exist at tier 2 and tier 3 as well. And so we're looking at what systems and supports are in place, what strategies and skills are a focus in that tier and in those service sectors, what kinds of implementation and outcome measures for decision making are being used, and what are the transition considerations as you move from one life stage to another. So this is kind of, as you're seeing here, it's aspirational. It's a kind of an ongoing, it's a work in progress. It's a collection of thoughts and observations and what we know to be going on in the state. So this is, if you join our working group, we're kind of thinking within this framework about what good work is going on and identifying examples of that and helping to connect the dots across the lifespan. We've also been doing a good bit of mapping, and this took a back seat when the pandemic hit, but we were working on an interactive map that would allow you to select different positive supports activities and see which of those are happening within a region that you're interested in. And so the data that are here on the screen are example data that were updated, I think probably last in 2019 or 2020. But it's a great slide to showcase the map that we do hope to get back online one day. That shows you, the green, the light green, the dark green indicates school districts that are implementing positive behavior interventions and supports across their schools or across their districts. And the dots represent where PBS facilitators and champions are, where person-centered practices and champions are, where are those PCT trainers, where are the PCT coaches, where is organization-wide person-centered practices and PBS in human service settings happening. So this interactive map is one that we hope to get back to here in the coming months. Our resources page is relatively new here on MNPSP.org. The link is at the top of the page here, and increasingly we will have some additional resources and links over the course of time, and this page will become ever more robust and useful to our community. So what are we doing moving forward? We're hoping to update and share that interactive map of PBS and complementary practices. We have a standards of practice document that many of you are familiar with in draft form and have contributed to in draft form over the years. And we are hoping to complete that in this calendar year. It's organized across tiers of support. It's organized across responsibilities in PBS implementation. And so it's designed to be useful across all of our PBS constituents here in Minnesota. And of course, we want to be adding to our library of resources on our website. So for our social media and marketing work group, we just take our hats off to Garrett and Julie and Amber and Rick, who maintain our Facebook and Twitter and YouTube presence. They respond to posting requests, and they generate the kind of growth in our reach that you see in these data on the screen that they so carefully maintain. You can see that there's this growth in our Twitter followers, in our Facebook followers. That reach in social media is fantastic. They've continued to set realistic goals in the table that you see on top. That's a current table, and they've had versions of that table for many, many years, looking at quarterly targets, and they've been hitting those targets. It's been wonderful to see the kind of reach that we've been able to achieve here through our social media. So if you're not a follower yet, please do follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and And we will continue to see those numbers and our reach and our influence increase. All right. And finally, our event planning work group. They have been responsible for these collaborators forums since 2017. There's been so much work by too many people over the years to name here. But I'll show some of the folks who have been involved, both within our network and folks who have been invited in from the outside as well. So this is 2017. This is what we called our first gathering. And then as many of you who are involved in person-centered practices in Minnesota know that there's a person-centered gathering. And so the name got confusing. So we changed it to the Collaborators Forum in 2018. But this was our first gathering. Barry McCurdy came in from Pennsylvania to deliver our keynote. And we had three strands. We had early childhood, led by Leanne Johnson, the K-21, led by Lynn Stansberry Brosnahan, and then the adult community strand led by Dan Baker. And there were exemplar stories in each of those strands, similar to how you're going to hear this afternoon, exemplar stories told by people who are in the field, who are doing the work every day. And this kicked us off. This was our first one in 2017. I remember it fondly. In 2018, Ashley McSuga Gage came and talked with us, gave our keynote from Florida. And at that point, we started to incorporate a focus beyond what PBS is to the implementation of it. So we're thinking about fidelity of PBS practices. And our on-site attendance that day was 175 people. We had 118 off-site watching remotely. And the data from this conference led the event planning team to identify additional sites for the Collaborators Forum. Presenters and facilitators were located across the state, and we wanted to make sure that this was really accessible to people, but also not just remotely, but could they get together in the same place in different parts of the state and really experience that sense of connection. And so in 2019, we had sites in Roseville, in Brainerd, and in Duluth, and had a total of 170 people across those sites. And we had, of course, other online connections individually throughout the state. And we had Karen Ward in as our keynote from the National Implementation Research Network. And in 2020, and this carried into 2021, based on feedback from 2019, we regrounded ourselves in the 9 core features of PBS. We looked for ways for people to come together from across the state in effective ways to find commonalities and to connect through them. We redoubled our efforts to make these events inclusive and relevant to people that were new to PBS and with more experience, having everyone at the table and learning from each other and teaching each other from their perspectives. And here's a snapshot of some of the evaluation data that we're using each year at the Collaborators Forum. You're going to receive a survey link later on today that will help us understand how useful this event was to you. And so we're interested in low versus high usefulness of this event. And we're interested in whether people are measuring fidelity in the course of their work. And so what we're hoping to see is a shift in these numbers over the course of years, up and to the right. So thank you to Garrett and Eric for that kind of image of the numbers moving up and to the right in a table like this. So please do fill out your survey that you get later today. That'll help us understand how well we're hitting the mark and where people are with measuring fidelity in their work as well. And don't forget, 2026, keep it on your calendars, APBS in Minneapolis. And now I'm going to turn it over to Erin Farrell to present an example of how people involved in our network are creating systemic change in Minnesota and making data-driven decisions. If we had more time today, we would also showcase data from our partners in early childhood supports at the Minnesota Center for Excellence Center of Excellence for Young Children with Disabilities, and the organization-wide positive supports training and technical assistance work that's going on through the Institute on Community Integration at the U of M in partnership with the Department of Human Services. But Erin is going to show us what the Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports team at MDE is doing and show us their updated data. And I will turn it over to Erin, and you can just tell me when you want to advance the slides.
Yeah, so we're going to be just talking about highlighting the work with Minnesota PBIS and our partnership at the Department of Education and all of the work that we've been doing. So this first slide, and so thank you, Tim. When we were talking about this, we just really wanted to have somebody being able to tell this great story and all of the work that's being done with PBIS across the state. So So this really represents where we have implementation of PBIS happening across our state. And so you can see the white areas are where we do not have schools who are implementing. The light green is where we have 1 to 59% of schools who are implementing, and these are all measured by school district. And then the dark green is where we have 60% or more of our schools implementing PBIS. And so you can see by the numbers there, that is 829 schools total, which is about 40% of our schools across the state. So I like to tell teachers that even if you're not in a PBIS school right now, at some point, it's likely that you will be, because we're continuing to grow and impact more and more students. You can see 391,000 students. And this is continuing to get filled in and to grow with all of our regional partners across the state. You can kind of see the lines on here. It's hard to see, but we have regional implementation through the North, South, and Metro. So if you can go to the next slide. So this is the slide that really shows our growth over time with PBIS across the state. So you can see we started implementing and doing our cohort model where we have schools who are in cohort training for 2 years. So we started that model in 2005 and 2006 school year. And the growth since then, you can see, has just been exponential. And so every year we have more and more schools who are wanting to implement and to learn how to implement PBIS in their schools. And so the dark blue, which is the largest part of that graph, are the schools who are sustaining and implementing PBIS even out of and ongoing out of training. The light green are schools who are in their first year of training, and the light blue are schools in their second year of training. And so, as I said a little bit earlier, that is our model is having 2 years of training, which is done with our amazing regional partners within the North and South and Metro. Some of them are here today, and some of them you are going to hear from today. And if you can go to the next slide. All right, and so what we focus on in that training is what's important with implementing PBIS. What are the core features, and what do we need to do to get schools to the point where they can be implementing with fidelity? And so we really focus on all of those tier 1 strategies first. And so you can see on here, there's a few examples where we focus on making sure that we have 3 to 5 positively stated expectations that are taught and practiced in schools. And so there's a tiny little matrix that you can kind of see on your slide if you zoom in, but we will have some examples from teams later today to show more of that. And then the acknowledgement and feedback system. So you can see that golden break ticket. That is one of those things that needs to be in place for how do students know they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and how can we help support that throughout a school. And so really having schools that are having the teams, which I always go to say teams, and then that's our last thing on there. All teams are implementing and helping support each other on the same place. And then we have consistent and specialized supports that are brought on by those different teams and also throughout the schools. Very, very important to make sure that you're making database decisions. So we help support teams to look at how do you measure your fidelity, and then how do you make decisions based on what you're measuring? How do you make decisions for what you need to continue to do or improve on with the data that's available to you? And so we work through teams on how to help support them in that process. And then having a continuum of interventions to support all behaviors. So that really means that, who's responding, whose job is it to, help get those tickets out there? Whose job is it to help reinforce the behavior of all students? And it really is everyone across. And then what if we do have some challenges? Who's responding to that? And so making sure that you have a really strong continuum of support that are really focused on positive behavior supports. And the team is critical. So the team, so I'm here today just representing a tiny little voice, but there is a team of people across the state that are helping to support this, from the Department of Education to our regional partners to all of those things. And it's really critical to support not only that system as a team, but also within your school teams as well. If you can go to the next slide. So this is what that implementation journey looks like. So we have teams, like I said earlier, measure their tier 1 fidelity. So that first measurement there is really our baseline. We know schools are implementing lots of great things even before they have been trained in PBIS. And so we want to know, what are you coming in with? What are those skills that you're starting with? And we take our first measurement of those tier 1 practices when they first come in for their first training across that 2 years. We then continue to measure that across time. And so for the times that we meet, there's 3 different times over the 2 years, and we have 2 days back to back in the first year, and then 1 day through the second year of training. And they're continuing to measure that with support. And we talk about, how to make the decisions on what you're scoring and all of that throughout the training process. And what we're hoping is by the end of the 2-year training that they're going to be at that 70% fidelity mark. And that's what that green line is. And you can see from these examples, we just have a few examples of what cohort 11 looked like through cohort 17 at that first fidelity score there. And then at the end, you get the example of all the way up through cohort 15, what that journey looks like. What we don't have fully represented here, we do have a lot of updated data here, but we from cohort 17 and 16, so you can see even with cohort 17 and 16, they're really having that growth over time. And what I mean by cohort 17 and 16 is these are schools who have been in training during the pandemic. So cohort 16 was the cohort that really saw just like they had to do in schools, we had to shift how we did our training. We went from fully in person to fully online for part of it, where now we're offering hybrid options. And that's due to our amazing regional partners and leadership that have really switched all of the modes of how we deliver this information. But when cohort 16 came in, so that was really, they are the cohort that has been fully trained during the pandemic. And so you can see their implementation journey is very similar to all of the schools that we've had before. This is our statewide averages. What we don't have on here is that final measurement for cohort 16 in the spring. But sources say that even though we have been in these very trying times, that cohort 16 is still meeting that 70% mark by the end of training for representing across. And you can see they got really close even in just the winter. And so to have teams that are able to be trained through this pandemic and change all of the ways that they're doing things, and they're still showing us the commitment that they have to improving outcomes for kids and implementing these practices in their schools, has just been an amazing story that we wanted to share with you today. And it really shows the commitment of the teams and people in schools who are doing this, as well as those teams and regional partners that are helping to support them along the way. So that's what we really wanted to focus on. And I think that's it that I have for you today.
Thank you, Aaron. That was wonderful. And thank you all for being here. I know we were hoping to hit that 10:30 mark, and we just had too much to share to stop right then. So we're a little over. So our apologies to Liz and the panelists at 10:30. But I'm going to stop and turn this right over to Liz Hari Dennis, who is moderating our panel discussion. And take it away, Liz.
All right. Hi, everybody. So excited to see everybody here today, and welcome. I'll have our panelists, I'll turn your cameras on if you can. So just a quick introduction here. We're welcoming some folks here to share some of their personal stories today. So I just want to set a few ground rules. The first one, we're all going to be nice and be polite in how we're interacting with those individuals. We really appreciate people being willing to be vulnerable and share their stories here. And so we want to, okay. Kara, let me know if you're still having trouble. So we want to make sure that we're all being kind to all of our panelists here today. I'm going to use person's first language as a sign of respect to start, but we should defer to people's preferences if they have a different way that they want to be referred to throughout our panel today. And I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves and say how they'd like to be referred to in a second. You can provide questions in the chat. I'm going to do some of my own questions, and then we're going to have a Q&A hopefully at the end here. And then because it works better for a few folks, we're going to have some folks share some slides to talk about their story first before we go into questions. So I'm going to start. I'm going to call on our panel members here and ask them to introduce themselves. So first, Tara, if you're on, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tara Nelson Anderson. I am a board certified behavior analyst that's been working in schools for about 17 years, I think it is. And then I'm the acting president of the school, Minnesota School-Based Behavior Analysts.
Thanks, Tara. Next, we have Lynn.
Hi, I'm Lynn Stansberry-Brustinahan, and I'm here representing a parent perspective today, and I'm joined by my son, Colin Brustinahan. So Colin, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Colin Brustinahan.
Thanks, Colin. All right. And then we have Kara. Kara, are you able to, I see you're on camera now.
Yes. Hi, I'm Kara. I'm also representing the parent perspective today. I have an 11-year-old with autism.
Great. Thanks for joining us today. All right. So I'm going to have Colin and Lynn go first. They had a couple of slides just to introduce themselves and talk about their experience here.
So I'm going to make sure I can share. Oh, I can. Good. All right. And then if you guys could give me a thumbs up that you can see the slides. Awesome. So I am Lynn Stansberry-Brustinahan, and I'm going to be presenting with Colin. And when I get to Colin, I'm going to ask him, I did do a recording because he does get a little nervous about presenting. But let's go ahead, and I'm going to be talking about our experience with ABA program in the home. And I'm going to do that from a parent perspective, but I have to let you know that I also have a professional perspective. So I became a professor many years after Colin was identified with autism, and now teach at the University of St. Thomas. So I'll be presenting, but I'm really going to hit this from the parent perspective, and Colin and I are going to talk to you about just some of the experiences that we had with applied behavior analysis. And because, as Tim Moore mentioned, this is a lifespan approach, we really thought we'd start with the lifespan. So Colin, when he was 2, we began this journey, and we're going to go up to adulthood with Colin now. But when he was 2, he didn't develop language, and people told my husband and I, oh, boys talk later and not to worry, but we worried. So we had a speech and language evaluation done, and they identified some delays. So Colin started with county services in a birth to 3 program. Wasn't he cute when he was little? He's still cute. All right. When Colin was 3, the Birth to 3 program had a psychologist who asked to meet with us. And that psychologist had taken a look at Colin in the preschool environment. And they noticed that he wasn't playing with the other kids. He preferred to play with the same item every day. And when they put it away, he'd really have a little problem with that, really want that item. And when he got overwhelmed, when the environment got loud, he would go and spin in the corner. But autism was 1 in 1,000 back then. So autism wasn't even talked about, even though these are classic symptoms of characteristics of autism. When Colin was 4, the educational team said they didn't think he was ready for K4. We live in Wisconsin and we have kindergarten starting at age 4. And we thought to ourselves, my husband and I, you don't not send a kid to kindergarten because they have a speech delay. A lot of kids have speech delays. So we pushed and sought further evaluations. And 2 years after clear characteristics, he finally received a diagnosis of autism. At that time, one of the parents who was in the preschool environment with Colin had a child who presented similar characteristics, and she pulled us aside and invited us to observe her son's home program. She was doing some things at home. So we went and we observed, and we were impressed with the skills her son was acquiring, but we were reluctant to sign our son up for this intensive home program because we were worried about him being able to engage in play. I mean, he was a child, and this parent was doing 40 hours of therapy in her home. And so the parent said, because she was very persistent, she said, well, watch what Colin's doing to see what you'd be taking him away from. So I started watching Colin. And he would sit in his room. He was the best child ever. He was so good. He would stay in his room for hours and do the same routines over and over again, a puzzle. And he could do the puzzle when it wasn't even showing the picture part from the back. He was so good at visual spatial skills. He would spin car wheels. He would line up Disney characters. And when we would try to interject in these activities, he would push away. He would prefer to do those activities by himself. So starting at age 4, we said we're going to try this. So we started an applied behavior program working with Wisconsin Early Autism Project and Dr. Glenn Sallows. And so there were lots of adults in and out of our house every day. It was a lot. It was invasive. It was 7 days a week. It was 40 hours. I'm just going to be really honest about that. We got our house painted at one time and the painters were like, what kind of business are you running here? Because like young people were in and out all day and a lot of young girls. So the painters didn't mind that. But they were like, are you doing a modeling agency? We're like, no, those are college students. They were college students from the local colleges who were studying psychology and study speech and language. But anyway, I just want to let you know, people were in and out of my house all the time. And when we first started the program, Colin was not wanting to participate. He was used to having his own way and doing the things that he wanted to do, and he would protest. He would become physically aggressive to others, but it became part of his routine, and the teachers made learning fun, and his sessions became his new routines. So we converted our whole attic into a playroom for learning, and Colin spent a lot of time learning. And during one lesson, Colin was learning to compliment others. And I remember he yelled out the attic window to a man who was walking by the sidewalk, I like your dog. And confused, the man was like looking around, like, where's that voice coming from? And Colin said, up here in the attic. And the man said, what are you doing up there? And he's like, I'm in therapy. And I was sure that social services was going to get called on me, but no, it wasn't. But so we had some fun experiences and Colin was learning. And so a lot of people said, why are you doing this? And that's why we kind of wanted to present, because we decided to do this intensive ABA program. Each family's going to make their own decisions, but we did a little research and we saw that there was effectiveness in these interventions. And we, as a parent, wanted to provide my son every opportunity. And so seeing that there was well-documented, thorough research and decades of research, we went on this journey. We didn't want to look back and say, well, we didn't try everything that we could. So intensive early intervention programs, when we took a look, we saw that there were gains in language and social behavior, and both of those were areas Colin needed some intervention. Also IQ, adaptive behavior, and academic performance. So that's why we were reluctant, but we gave it a shot. And a lot of time, I want to really kind of talk about, because a lot of people, when they say ABA, they don't know what they're talking about, like what exactly they mean by that. ABA is scientific principles. And so when using the principles, you target socially significant skills. So in the case for us, we were all in because we wanted to really target Colin developing language and social skills. And the way it works is they target those skills, they provide intervention, and they measure to see if the skills changed or didn't change based on the intervention. And ABA is really an umbrella term. And when I'm talking about our ABA program that Colin went through, we used a lot of evidence-based practices, but the most relevant one that I'm just going to talk about a little bit is we used a lot of discrete trial training, a lot of reinforcement. And with discrete trial training, what Colin was engaged in is this really intensive ABA program focused around discrete trial. We started early, which they recommend. We did do 40 hours a week. We were really people were coming in 7 days a week. We did it very intensely for 2 years, but we continued having and working with the Wisconsin Early Autism Project until Colin graduated from high school. We kept some intervention coming in about 15 hours a week as he got older to provide opportunities for him to get out in the community and to work on some things that he was learning at school. And so initially it was a lot of one-on-one, sitting across at a table, but then we transitioned and brought in group instruction and peers. And we really worked on generalization. We would practice things at home and then gradually transition to classroom and out the community. I remember one time we were working on the complimenting again, and we went to Baskin Robbins. Colin, plug your ears because I know you don't like to hear these stories, but there was a little girl that had like a midriff on, and Colin walked over and said, "I like your belly button," because he was working on complimenting. And you just learn, well, maybe not belly buttons. That maybe is one that we're not going to put in the complimenting program, but we were working on generalizing, and he was generalizing. And so Colin was spending a lot of time learning and acquiring new skills. And that's what discrete trial was all about for him. It was highly prescribed. There was a teaching structure they'd get his focus and then they'd follow a curriculum. When we first started, they came in with 8 hours in our home and doing a workshop and figuring out where he was. And then they'd figure out where the curriculum. And sometimes as a parent, I'm like, why are they working on that? They had this sequential curriculum. I remember they were teaching him to imitate animal sounds and to act like he was a dog and walk around on all fours. And I remember one of the neighborhood kids came over one time, and she's like, it was right around Easter, and she said, "Let's pretend to be Easter bunnies." And she put up her ears and started hopping, and Colin started doing it. And I was like, these people are brilliant. I would never have taught him to sound like animals and do animal things. So I trusted the professionals. When they taught him the skills, it was really precisely defined how they were going to teach it to him. And even they had like how they were going to provide an instruction and what they would do if he was correct. So it was very systematic. There were frequent opportunities for him to learn, and things were done over and over and over again. So I understand why people say some of the things they say about it, but it was really a good way for him to learn. And so at the beginning, he would get really like primary reinforcement for skills that he was trying to acquire, maybe a little M&M, but then they transferred that to more naturally occurring. And he really liked being with the teachers, and even thumbs up started to be something that he would work for. And so anyway, it was a really good experience for us. I'm just going to talk about discrete trial, and then I'm going to let Colin tell his story. So what they did too is they took tasks and they broke them down really into simple discrete steps. And so they would teach that very simple step, and then as he learned that and mastered that, they would add to that. So he got a lot of learning opportunities in a small amount of time. And when they did discrete trial in our house, it was what you see ABA programmers doing a lot of time. It's discrete trial. They provide an instruction. Maybe they'd say, touch your nose. And then he would respond. And then based on what he did, he'd get some reinforcement or some corrective feedback. And then they pause. And during those pauses, he could play and do things. We had lots of activities for him to do. So the reason we decided to do it as parents is that he was not ready to learn. He needed to learn. And so they worked on helping him be ready to learn, to attend, to imitate, to listen, to talk, and self-help skills as well. So he learned a lot of really important skills in those first 2 years that really set him up for school. So Colin right now is in Indiana with his father. Unfortunately, our dog died yesterday, and we have a family farm in Indiana, so they went to bury him. So it's kind of a sad day today. So I'm going to let Colin unmute. Colin, do you want to unmute?
Uh-huh.
Do you want me to show the video, or do you want me to show the PowerPoint and you can talk?
So the PowerPoint and talk.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a video. I'm going to show a video first that Colin did in high school. He wanted to start off with that. So let me go to the video. How are you guys doing in Indiana? How was the drive there yesterday?
Listen to MLB Network the whole time.
All right, Colin's a little upset because of the player strike.
Talking.
I know that I'm not everything that you think I should be, but I'm not gonna worry myself 'cause in the long run, I just gotta be me. I wanna do whatever makes me happy. I wanna do whatever makes me smile. Yeah, I'm gonna keep on chasing rainbows, dancing in the sunshine, talking to myself. I know that nothing's gonna bring me down. Yeah, I'm 10 feet off the ground. Yeah, yeah, oh, oh, oh. Sometimes I just laugh at myself 'cause I'm feeling so good. I'm not gonna hide how I feel, wouldn't do it if I could. I don't care if you think I'm crazy, gonna keep on being who I am. Yeah, I'm gonna keep on chasing rainbows, dancing in the sunshine, talking to myself. I know that nothing's gonna bring me down. Yeah, I'm 10 feet off the ground. Yeah, I'm feeling 10 feet off the ground. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna keep on chasing rainbows, dancing in the sunshine, talking to myself. I know that nothing's gonna bring me down. Yeah, I'm 10 feet off the ground. Gonna keep on chasing rainbows, dancing in the sunshine, talking to myself. I know that nothing's Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
I can see.
Okay, all right, you can take over there, Colin.
Even though my camera's dark.
That's okay, but you can talk. I think they can see you.
Um, thank you, Sue.
Can you see the slide that says I am Colin Brusnahan?
It's covered.
All right. There we go.
Hi, I'm Colin Brusnahan. The video I started was a high school speech class. I get anxious. I do not like talking about myself. This is why I have recorded this session.
So we did record it. So in case Colin got anxious that he could show that, but he's being very brave and he's going to talk today.
I'm going to tell you about my early and current life. I'm 30 years old. When I was 4, I did not talk. I spent most of my time alone. I would do puzzles for hours in my room. I was diagnosed with autism. Starting at age 4, I started learning an ABA program in my home. Lots of people came to my house to teach me. I was learning 77 days a week for 40 hours. I did 2 to 3 hours of learning in the mornings and afternoons. During the sessions, I would learn something to get a little break to do what I wanted. My teachers made fun learning. My teachers became part of our family because they were at my house so much. I remain part of their lives. I've been to their weddings, I'm on Facebook with them. When I started learning in my ABA program, I couldn't talk. I learned every single letter sound. Then I put the letters together to form words and learn to talk. When I started my ABA program, the only people my life were my parents. I didn't interact with others. Peers started to come over to my house 10 hours a week. At first, my teachers and mom showed me how to play with my peers. Then I began to play with my peers. 25 years later, I'm still friends with those peers. I have a rich social life, which I will tell you about because of skills I've learned in my home program. My home team worked on school skills so I could be fully included in elementary, intermediate, and high school. In school, I played the cymbals. We practiced what I needed to do in my home program and then used the skills when I went with the band to St. Louis and New York. I ran on my cross country team. We won state championships 3 years. There was an article about me running in the paper. This is Gabby, who started coming to my house in kindergarten. We went to prom together. This is Melanie, who started coming to my house in kindergarten. This is Jake and Chase, who came over to my house when we were young. Chase lives in California and wants me to visit. My ABA program helped me learn skills I could use in jobs. At Discovery World, I worked in the gift shop, in the aquarium. I showed people how to pet the fish. Some fish were very friendly because you could tell because they wagged their tails. I volunteered at Growing Power. They have fish, chickens, and goats. One day the chickens got out and I went to a staff, are the chickens supposed to be out? I became more social with the skills I learned in my home program. I participated in Special Olympics. Check out my gold medal. I go to church. I've been part of this group since middle school. I have lots of hobbies. I really like watching sports. I like to travel. We fly Delta Airlines. My mom used to work there. I've been to Disney in Florida, California, Japan, and France. Here I am riding a zip line and hiding in leaves. Here I am driving a go-kart and a four-wheeler and on my cousin's motorcycle. Here I am kayaking in California with Boston Dolphins. Here I am on a Segway tour in Chicago. I ride the light rail in Minnesota. This is my sister and I riding the Amtrak to Chicago. I went to Minnesota Life College for 2 years and lived in an apartment with roommates. Then I went to Edgewood College for 4 years. I took Spanish classes. I can say many words in Spanish. When I was in college, I met a wonderful girlfriend, Olivia. I like politics. I always vote. Here I am in Washington, D.C. I guess not that I'm a Democrat. I like to go to Indiana where my extended family lives. I like to trap shoot at our farm. I'm a good shot, but my dad is better. I've done presentations on autism. I was on TV in Abilene, Texas. I have met other self-advocates, Temple Grandin, Steve Shore, and Tracy and Larry from Wretches and Jabbers movie. Other things I like to do, explore Google Maps, ride my bike, read the New York Times, send postcards, eat Thai food. I could go on and on about things I like to do. Having teachers come to my house when I was young helped me learn to talk about and help me gain social skills so I could have fun with others. I had a positive experience and my teachers made fun learning.
Thank you, Colin. Let's give Colin a little hand for getting over his
Mhm.
anxiety. Thank you, Colin.
Oh, that was excellent. You are an excellent presenter.
Thank you.
I think you have a future. You sound like you're a great advocate. So I hope I hear you speak again soon. And is it okay if I ask you some questions here as we go along here?
Yeah,
All right. Can you hang on for a little bit while I ask a few other people some questions?
yeah.
All right. Thanks, Colin. I'm going to ask a few other people to go over some stuff. So we also have Kara, who's a parent here. Kara, I wanted to shift to you first after kind of hearing Colin's story and Lynn's story. Your son's a little bit younger than Colin. I'm just wondering how that experience, how Lynn and Colin's experience is to yours, and if anything has changed with your son being a little bit younger.
Oh, yeah, certainly. I have to start by saying, Colin, you are an inspiration. I would love for you to meet my Max. And it's so nice to meet you. And it was so fun to hear about all of what ABA did to help you and how full your life is and how fun it is. So my son Max is 11. He started out, I would say, fairly similar. I can't do that beautiful story justice really by retelling, but ours is very, very similar, but we did not do 40 hours a week in home at first. We did, the provider shortage, I think in many ways impacted the amount of hours that we were able to do. So we did about, I would say anywhere between 15 and at our highest point, probably 20 hours. And then we were able to switch to a center-based program when Max got a little bit older, which was really nice. It was close to our house with Fraser, and it was wonderful. It provided a new environment to work on those ready to learn skills. It was easier to generalize, I think, in some ways, and also a little more difficult because it was hard to see Max go off to school every day so young for so long. And it was a full day for him. Those were the longer hours. And then he transitioned to the school when he was 6 years old, and he is in ISD 196. And now we get PBS through telehealth, which has been amazing. So probably some differences there. I think from the PBS side, in the center-based and in-home programs, we had FST, and that was great. I would say the PBS support that I'm getting now has been really amazing, better than, and by me, I think Max, the PBS support that Max is actually getting has been much more impactful.
Great, thanks, Kara. And Tara, for you, you're working in schools, so I'm wondering, what does this look like in schools? Are you providing, this level of direct instruction, or what does your role look like in the schools and supporting people in schools using ABA?
So my role looks a little different. So ABA in schools is a little bit more of that support around the tiered systems. So I spend time in the classrooms working on tier 1 interventions, kind of ABA for the masses, I guess it is, when you think about the 80% of students in those tiers, and ensuring that there's solid instruction and classroom expectations, school-wide expectations along with that, posted rules, and really making, and like that task analysis that Lynn was talking about is breaking down all those tasks for our general education students. So I support a lot of that tiered support with teachers, and then also supporting like the child study teams. So and tier 2 and tier 3 teams in our classrooms or in our schools, which is more of the like check-in and check-out and functional behavior assessments at our tier 3 and our special ed students. So my role looks a little different than ABA in home or in a clinical setting. So it's more kind of how to support teachers, how to support teams in implementing function-based intervention through the behavior intervention plans and positive behavior supports in the classrooms.
Thanks, Tara. So here's my first question for everyone. Colin, I'll have you go first, okay? What's the positive behavior support practice that's made the biggest impact on you? What do you think is the thing that's made the biggest difference for you in ABA?
So Colin, so think about like what you learned from the teachers that came into the house, and what's something that you, or maybe from the peers that came into the house, what did you learn?
One thing I remembered is learning how to problem solve.
Tell me some more about that. What does that mean to you?
We looked at different pictures, like a family having a picnic and they smell that there's a skunk close by.
So what did they do?
They were, they just stayed on their blanket by their food so that maybe the skunk wouldn't spray their food.
Perfect. Yeah. So how do you use that now that you're an adult?
How do you problem solve?
Like other people might realize that something's wrong and you're not getting response back from somebody.
One of the things we did in our home program is we did, going back to Tara, just building off what you said, we worked really closely with our home team, being able to problem solve things that he was having challenges with at school. Also, Colin had a very great experience with inclusion, so he's fully included because we were able to support, the therapist and the teachers at home working with that. For example, when he went to high school, they didn't want him in an English lit class because they were worried that he wouldn't comprehend. They were reading Romeo and Juliet and Shakespeare. And we said, no, we want to support him. And the home team was willing to do that. So we got different versions of Romeo and Juliet, and we would read a page, his parents, and he would read a page. And the home team would read a page, and we watched different movies about Romeo and Juliet. Remember that, Colin? And so we were all immersed in Romeo and Juliet at our house. And then when we got to the last page, Colin read the last page and sat there for a little while. We were all quiet, and of course everybody was dead. And Colin said, that was not a happy ending. So what made our heart feel so good is that collective effort between the behavioral therapist, the school team, and the parents. Colin maybe didn't understand some of the intricacies of what was going on with the feuding between the families, but he did experience the powerful ending of Shakespeare's work. Later that same year, Colin wanted to go see A Midsummer Night's Dream. The high school was doing that. Remember, Colin? And on the way, I'm like, well, who do you know in the play? I thought we were going to see someone. And he said, I don't know who's in it. And I said, well, why are we going? He said, we're going to see it because it's by Shakespeare, and Shakespeare is a wonderful author. And one of the things that I really feel blessed at with being able to go through this experience with the behaviorists coming into the house and working with them, Colin was exposed to Shakespeare. And I just don't think that might happen in every special ed classroom. And Colin was exposed to what his peers were exposed to. So he was exposed to the world, and he was able to have those peer relationships because of the team effort between the educators, the behaviorists, all working together. So that's some of the really, when Colin went to New York and St. Louis with the band, they were worried about him going on these trips. We figured out the restaurants he was going to, the home team. They looked and had Colin practice what he was going to order. They put the money in a Ziploc bag. They told him how much to tip. So he was prepared to have those inclusive experiences with his peers. A couple of years ago, one of the people that Colin had peer play with, like 10 hours a week, people came into my house, peers, little kids. And a lot of times I was playing with them. It was like my free daycare. I was exhausted at the end of the day from playing all day. But I was sitting on the airplane and someone walked by and said, Mrs. Brusnahan, hi. And I looked up, he said, it's Chase, the Thursday kid. And Chase, the Thursday kid, is still friends with Colin. So some of the investment, Colin and I really wanted to just share with you that it's a lot of investment by families. And sometimes people, look at us and judge us for some of the things that we do. But as you can see, by able to hear Colin's story from his lifespan story up to age 30, that it had tremendous benefits. It doesn't work that way for everyone, but Colin had a very positive experience and has a very rich social life, much more social than me. So, Colin, remember, Chase wants you to come to California, right?
Yeah.
And he was at our house every day every Thursday when he was little.
And it looks like you caught a train. Well, you're
I
down
did
there,
just
maybe.
see a train. There's
That's
a
so-
railroad in front of the cornfield.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to ask Kara next. Just what do you think is the part of ADA that's had the biggest impact for you and your son?
It's really hard to say. It changes with the season in terms of what has had the biggest impact. I think when I feel those moments where we're having the highest amount of success, it really hinges on what Lynn touched about collaboration, because the best outcomes really are when we're all working toward a common goal and purpose, and that Max is on board, that the school's on board, that any outside provider help support is on board. And our PBS plan, for example, I think one of the really great things about that is the PBS plan that we're working on at home is general enough that I can share it, and helpful enough across settings that I can share it at outside OT, outside speech, in the school. And we are really, really lucky. Max's teacher this year, we have a monthly meeting with her and our PBS support, BCBA, and it's been really life-changing for Max. This is the best year he's ever had. His general ed teacher participates in our meetings, which I've never had before, quite such involvement with his general ed teacher. So I think collaboration is what I would say, and the ability to use the skills across settings and use the supports across settings.
Great. And Tara, for you as a practitioner, what do you see in your work as having the biggest impact in positive behavior support practices?
So I think in terms of the largest impact, I'm going to go global a little bit, is like the largest impact for the most kids that I see on the day to day is when we have really solid tier 1 intervention happening in the classroom, which promotes that collaboration. I love to hear those positive stories about collaboration. And then just having those gen ed teachers have the supports that they need to know how to lay out their classrooms so that all kids know what to do. They know what to expect. They're explicitly taught what the expectations are. They are reinforced for following through with the expectations. They get better attention when they're doing what they're supposed to be doing than they do when they're having maybe more of a struggle in the classroom. And that consistency that we can kind of promote through those tier 1 interventions, because ultimately, like, we don't want kids to need that level of support, the intense level of support. If we can really hit those tier 1 in a solid manner, I feel like that's made the biggest impact on the most kids, and it made makes the teachers feel better. They feel like they have a positive environment. They want to, like, they know that their kids want to be there, and they in turn like feel that they want to be there to help the kids every single day. And obviously, like, the opportunity to collaborate. I love hearing the stories with those, the gen ed teachers and the special ed teachers and the family having those collaborations, because that's how you get big change with students, is when everybody's communicating and kids know exactly what's expected of them. So.
I love that, creating positive environments for everybody. I think that's great. That's lovely. Thank you. Colin, I've got another question for you. So you had helpers in your house when you were little. Do you have helpers now that you're all grown up that come and help?
I don't.
You don't?
No.
Wow.
Some of them have kids already.
They do. All right. So do you have any supports right now, or what does anyone help you in, or what does work look like for you now?
Why don't you, Colin, why don't you share about how you lived in the dorm on your own when you were at Edgewood College?
I lived by myself at Edgewood with no air conditioning at the beginning.
We got you a fan. Why don't you tell them about your job at Edgewood, the Go Eddie?
Oh, I drove a golf cart because I wanted to know how to drive. And Chase, who I talked about, he was the first person to say to me, "You're going to be a good driver."
Who were you driving at college? Do you want to tell, who did you drive at the college? Why did you?
Students, professors, guests.
Mm-hmm. If someone broke their leg, you'd give them a ride to class.
And then during a play, the president had his own golf cart, so we used his golf cart to escort people to the show.
And then during COVID, we decided not to seek employment because we actually have a 4-year-old. So Colin, do you want to talk about how not only are you independent, how you're helping out with the care of a 4-year-old?
I have a 4-year-old sister named Lulu. And sometimes I'd have her ask me things like, "Are you gonna watch the ball game?" And sometimes she always knows what I buy that's food. And she knows where I put them.
And do you want to talk about what your plans
Oh,
are?
and
that
she
you want
also knows, she also tells me when there's a train.
Yeah, she does like trains too. Why don't you tell them what you're planning, that you'd like to move to Madison with your girlfriend and get a job? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? You had that job too at Camp Randall.
Yeah, I've worked at the Camp Randall Stadium during football games.
And are you planning to move in with your girlfriend and get a job? You want to say that?
Well, I'm being talked about moving in with a girlfriend.
That's so great. Good for you. That's exciting.
Yeah.
How does it feel to grow up to be a helper?
For me, I can find it be a hard job. This thing that I'm not used to.
I just think it's cool that you grew up to be a helper and help other people in a lot of ways. That's really cool.
Mhm.
All right, I'm going to ask a few other people some questions. And I'm going to come back to you, okay? All right. So Lynn, maybe you you have a perspective, I think, you know, not only from your own experience as a parent, but then kind of teaching this stuff. You know, for you, what do you think has changed over the years in ABA and positive support service delivery?
Well, I love the positive that's come into ABA and the positive behavior supports. One of the things that I find very interesting is that it's so interesting how it comes back to, you know, the criticism of the field. And just the myth busting, that's something that's not gone away since Colin was little. So to really have to explain what you're doing, explain, you know, and I think that that's something that hasn't changed. But I do really like the positive behavior support. But I have preparing educators a lot of time. Kira, you and I, we have to share our story because a lot of times they're apprehensive about working with BCBAs and outside behavioral teams, and they don't really understand the importance. I don't know what that apprehension is. I've never understood it, but really being open if you're in a group home, if you're, you know, it doesn't matter the site, if you're in a transition site, if you're in a work environment, the more that we can collaborate together and is really important. So I think I've talked enough, so I'm going to let others talk, but that's really where I've seen that positive coming in has been really nice to see. But it's interesting just how it just keeps going round and round, the controversy around some of the programming.
So Kara, for you, I mean, your son's younger now, but I mean, you've transitioned from early intervention, you're starting to go into school. Have you noticed anything that's changed over supports that are available? You mentioned having, you know, a workforce shortage or like, you know, provider shortage issues. Anything that's changed over the, you know, last 11 years or so?
You know, it's really hard to comment because Max has changed over the course. So it's hard for me to look at the timeline and say much about that. I do agree with Lynn that there seems to be this disconnect in philosophy or something that I experienced. I'm just so heartened to see that Tara and I have no idea how many of you are out there working in the positions that you have, but I think as a parent, I would love to see way more school districts have you and across special ed and general ed and everything else. I think there is just so much to be gained from that. I agree, Lynn. I don't understand sort of the philosophy difference. I think it's particularly challenging at times of transitions, transitioning into the school district, for example, because school districts often are, I don't know how to say it. I think that they're committed and believe in their approach, and that sometimes does or sometimes doesn't include similar practices. I think for the most part it does. It's just different language, I guess, is maybe a better way to say it. And this lack of a streamlined vernacular impacts collaboration, and it creates a really tough transition point, particularly for parents. I mean, you can imagine people like Lynn and I have our children, our most vulnerable children, in a program that we really believe in, anywhere from 10 to 40 hours a week. And then we transition into a school district that doesn't maybe adopt the same or doesn't seem to adopt the same approach in some ways. And the handoff can be not a warm handoff. It can be sometimes a cold handoff. And that is really challenging. So one thing I would love the PBS at large to think about is just sort of best practices for transitions, best practices to support the interaction between providers, sort of private providers and school districts, truly across the lifespan, because I do recognize that there are lots of folks that, I haven't had that experience, but I know that a lot of folks kind of go in between sometimes different providers, and that can be really challenging. So
I'm writing this down as you're talking. I think that's great. Yeah. So Tara, I mean, from your side of the equation then on that hand up, can you build off a little bit of what Kara's saying and talk about, how we're working to improve that piece on your end as a practitioner?
Yeah, and to answer Kara's question a little bit too about how many BCBAs, and Erin might have better stats on this too, but I feel like as part of, we have Minnesota has a Minnesota school-based behavior analyst group, and there's roughly 50 members in that group right now, working in both gen ed buildings, intermediate districts, like 287, 916, 917, and then also like a rural co-op setting. And then we have members from like Southwest West Central, which does push in services or like consultation services for schools, more in that in their like Marshall Southwest, I guess it's Southwest West Central services down in Minnesota. So the field is growing in terms of school-based behavior analysts. And I think there's always a need. And I think that's something as a group that we've collectively wanting to like show what we can do. Angelica said that in the chat too. I saw that just sharing what we can do in schools and how we can support that collaboration with parents and families, because it is more, yes, BCBAs do discrete trial training and task analysis and do all of those things, but we can support in basic behavior analytic principles and helping teachers to feel more confident in their classrooms and the classroom management systems that we can put in place. So I think there is a partnership that needs, so yes, it's skill-based and individually student-focused, but also like the behavioral principles that we can help implement as a whole in the academic and educational environment is really a place for us to grow. Did I answer the question? I'm not sure.
You did. And I've got a follow-up question. I mean, it sounds like, yeah, you're taking this on as this individual provider a lot. Is there anything that would help, make your job easier? Any other support that would, push things along?
I think it's always like I spend, and I'm just going to speak for Robbinsdale, like I spend a lot of time working with psychologists and social workers that work in our buildings so that we can, grow their practice around behavior principles. And then they also support those buildings because, there's 2 behavior analysts in our district and we have like 13 to 15 buildings. And so like we are stretched thin. And I think that's the fact we're fortunate to have 2. And so it's figuring out how to give enough content and having that opportunity to share what we know to other professionals so that they can continue to do the work in the buildings when we're not all present. So I think it's a lot of training and it's that time to be able to do that. And we all know like education does not have the educational world does not have a lot of extra time to do all of that. But we're hopeful. I think we've made some really significant gains and we're always trying to kind of turn the tide in terms of what people think ABA is and the practices that we can bring to the table.
And I'll just piggyback off that, Tara, so well said. And what Rachel talked about is, really helping people understand what ABA is. What Erin Farrell teaches at the University of St. Thomas, and so do I. And one of the things when we teach our behavior class, we will ask, how many of you consider yourself people who use behavioral principles on a regular basis, and very few educators will raise their hand or will say, do you use the principles of applied behavior analysis? And they are very reluctant to say that they use the practices. And then we do what Rachel Freeman talked about in the chat. We start talking about the things that fall under the umbrella of ABA. And at the end of the class, at the end of the semester, we ask that question again, and a lot more hands go up because they didn't understand that they had already adopted the practices because they weren't trained that way. Because we have like is it Kara or Kara? Kara talked about that we do our separate things and we talk different ways. So we don't even know that we're doing what we're doing. So
That's really interesting. And I think it's really cool to hear you, Tara, say, well, it's a lot harder to talk in the abstract when we're in the trenches together working. And I think what I'm hearing you, Kara, say is it's a lot harder for people to talk in the abstract when we're in the room talking about my child. And so it's a lot easier to collaborate around a person, a real thing, a real life sometimes. And that's often where we get our start on some of this stuff, even if there is other stuff out there going on. All right, really cool to hear these stories. All right, I've got a few more questions, and then I'm gonna hand it over to some audience questions for about the last 20 minutes. I've got till noon here, and I'm committed to ending meetings on time. I'm a little bit of a stickler about that. So, next thing I just want to check in on is, I was one of the members, board members of Manaba, and we wanted to have this conversation with more folks about how we really highlight the importance of an empathic listening approach, how we're taking person-centered practices into account in ABA services delivery. And so I just wonder for you, and maybe Colin, I'll come, maybe I wonder, for Colin, for you, does anyone ever ask you about your doing therapy and what it was like?
I don't think I've had anybody ask me that.
What would you say if they asked you?
I would say they're trying to get me to be smart.
That's cool. I like it. Do you think, is there anything that you would have changed about therapy?
No.
That you can think of? What about a favorite thing about therapy? Do you have a favorite thing?
Well, I had someone who told me that they couldn't come on a Monday, so I had to think about what we wanted to do the next time.
Oh.
Colin, you're already smart. So Colin, what about you want to talk about like when Laura or Heather, do you want to talk specifically about when different people came over? What was some of your favorite parts of when they came to teach you? Why did you like Heather and Janice and Heidi, Melissa?
Well, going to Melissa and Janet, they talked about their cat.
You did like to connect on the animals because you do love animals.
Yep. And then Melissa's Aunt Kathy does spread with me, so I would be update by Kathy.
It's so funny because we stay connected through these networks of people that we've had throughout. So everyone's connected to someone. And so Colin has created lifelong relationships that he's stayed in touch with these individuals. So he knows, who their kids are, that he knows where they went to college. He went to their weddings. So it was a nice social network for him. So a lot of times people look at things so, he was doing 40 hours a week, but a lot of really great things were happening in that time as far as social relationships and that type of thing as well.
Yeah, Colin, it sounds like you have a lot of friends that you've made in life or friends that you made in therapy.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Maybe I should give you a chance to talk about the MLB strike at the end of this.
It's not a strike, it's a lockout.
It's the lockout. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm going to give you a chance to talk about it. Maybe I'll ask you some easy questions about the lockout after this. Maybe I'm asking you hard questions today. All right. Thanks, Colin. You're a great panelist and you're doing a great job. And I really appreciate you being here. So for Lynn, I'm just wondering for you, how do you communicate that to students? And it sounds a little bit like, you have an ongoing dialogue in your classes, but how are you then talking about how ABA and PBS, it brings in person-centered planning, choice, all these other things?
Well, I know when I first started teaching at the university, I co-taught with someone who presented the ABA section very negatively. And the first time I came to the university, the program was already in place. So I did a lot of observing. And so I said, we need to have multiple perspectives at the table. And I understand everyone's got different opinions about things. So when presenting at the university, I try to provide multiple voices. And I think it's really important to bring those voices in. And that's why it's so nice, Colin, that you were able to join us today, because I feel like that we can't do person-centered planning without the person at the table. So Colin's always been at the table. So, and that's what I'm at the university, when we're talking about autism, when we're talking about behaviors, when we're talking about all disability areas, we're talking about that proactive nature of it and the positive, and what Aaron Farrell talked about, those tier 1 supports. So at the university level, we're really focusing on those positives, those proactive, those, and understanding behavior, because I think a lot of times people miss and rumors and the things that people look at negativity are a lot of times because of a lack of understanding. So just making sure that everyone has that understanding, because I know, we're seeing the positives and what a great life Colin's having, but it wasn't without a lot of work and without a lot of, that's why I try to let people know that I'm not just remembering the good things. When we did our workshop for 8 hours, my mom was at the house and Colin was not happy about it. He was being asked to do some things that he hadn't been asked to do before. And so he was protesting and he was crying. It was really hard for my mom to see. And so when I share this with educators, I try to provide both sides, so that they can see why some people might not do this, why some people might decide to do this, and why some people might have different experiences. Because if a child doesn't work through that protesting, through the tantruming, doesn't get to a place where they're comfortable like Colin was, this might not be the right approach for them. So this is not for everyone. There's different ways to go about. But what I do want people to know is that this does work for some individuals. And so we don't want to take it off the table or say that should never be done, because for some it has really long lasting, really positive outcomes. And I was all over the place. You can see why I had a PowerPoint before. So I could go off. So anyway, yeah. So
great. All right, thanks, Lynn. So Kara, for you, I think, kind of the same question, but I'm wondering, do you feel like the supports that were provided to you, took into account, where your son was at, where your family was at, and took your preferences into account? And were people listening to you along that way?
I think so. Yes. I mean, I would say generally, absolutely. Yes. There were some times when I would be confused or wonder why. I think Lynn touched on this a little bit. There's such an evidence-based practice related to ABA. I'd say things like, well, my son is doing these skills. Why are we working on these that seem to come before that skill? And so sometimes there would be a little bit of tension, let's say, around that. And then it quickly dissipated because the evidence was brought to my attention that, we didn't want to teach splinter skills. We wanted to, build out the base. I don't know if that answers your question. But I think all along the way, it's been pretty open with us, no matter what type of therapy he's receiving. And I'm a pretty strong advocate to find out why, if I'm curious. So.
Anything that you would change or anything you'd recommend to any practitioners on the call to make sure that they do webinar?
I think the reason it's worked out so well is because when I did question, there was not a defensiveness to it. at all. It was welcomed actually when I would question. It was almost like they got excited to explain to me why they wanted to, or would suggest a certain approach. I think certainly the PBS model that I'm doing now, and again, it's a different stage, so I'm not really criticizing the previous, more just thinking in the here and now and what's so beneficial about now is it's really collaboratively created. So I would love to have Max participate more in creating those sort of PBS plans. He's not in a space where he really can. So I'm always in that situation where I'm kind of advocating for him alongside kind of our family or my perspective. But the fact that it's taken so much into account and respected, and is truly the driver, I would say, in how we create the plan, I think is a critical component to making it as successful as it is.
Great. I really love that. And I think I'm really going to take that to heart because I do think you're thrown off when someone's defensive versus, yeah, I'm a nerd. I'm going to explain this to you and exactly why it's important. I would get excited too. I would be your nerd out therapist for sure. Tara, Tara, for you, I'm just wondering, how do you support that in schools? I mean, are there particular tools that you use? Are there particular structures in your PBIS program that provide for choice and are enabling that empathic listening and making sure that we're getting the person's and the kids served their perspective and how they're receiving supports?
So I can talk a little bit about it in a couple different ways. So as a practitioner in schools, I kind of have multiple clients. I'm an employee of the district. I have a teacher as my client sometimes because I'm supporting classroom management, and sometimes it's the parent and the family and the actual student as my client. So I have to kind of think about that a little bit differently sometimes. But I'm always that I'm using like the language that needs to happen with that group of people. I know when I go into classrooms and teachers sometimes look at me like, oh, you're the behavior analyst. What can you say? Oh, so you're not a licensed teacher. Oh, so you're, and so it's really like when you talk about being defensive and coming from that defensive place, it's really, it's sometimes hard and off-putting to try to work your through, but I absolutely do try to like nerd out on the supports that we can provide. And so thinking about setting those collaborative goals and what we're looking for and remembering to focus on those is like, oh, so you're telling me that you're, struggling here, what can we do? And trying to get the teacher to, and also the family so that we're all on the same page and that we all have collective agreement. And what's going back, what's the definition of our behavior? What are we looking for? Is to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what we're talking about. Because I think a lot of times when there's a miscommunication or anything like that, a lot of times we don't have the same common definition of what we're talking about. I think a perfect example of that in school is when we talk about consequences in schools. Consequences as a behavior analyst means something very different as a consequence to like a licensed teacher. They think of consequences as purely the negative, like more punishment-based thoughts. Whereas as those of us that have those grounded in ABA, we're talking about that sometimes it's just natural consequences, or sometimes it's the peer attention, or sometimes it's this. So thinking about making sure that we're all grounded so that we all can listen to each other and have that same collaborative conversation based on the same grounding principles, that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, getting that ABC data
Yeah.
it's always the first training hurdle. It always feels like, yeah. All right. Well, great. Well, I'm going to we've got 15 minutes left. So I was just going to open it up for questions. You can put them in the chat or the Q&A. And if I don't get any, Colin and I are going to do a breakdown of the MLB lockout. So, so if you have questions, I'm just going to give you a second. Please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. Okay, and I'm not seeing any questions come in yet. All right.
We were just that thorough, weren't
You're
we?
just that thorough. Maybe, maybe Colin, I might hold off on the MLB lockout. I have one more question for you first. I'm trying to think of how to put this.
Can you see the questions? Because I'm not,
Oh, there's one. All right.
there's one. Mhm.
I got one. Somebody asked, what's your favorite animal?
Elephants and giraffes.
Ooh. I like it. That's a good question.
Colin's done a lot of work with pets. He actually worked in a Serenity Pet Spa,
With,
and he's
uh,
babysat or pets sitting he's engaged in, and he's thinking about for his employment now that COVID's well, whatever it is, we're going to start looking for some employment, and he's looking in the pet industry. So if anybody has any good ideas.
Oh, that's great. That's really cool. Where are you looking, Colin?
we're looking somewhere in Milwaukee.
Okay. Really cool. I forgot you lived in Milwaukee. Oh, I've got another question here. It says, do you use Duolingo to learn
Oh.
Spanish?
Huh. I haven't done a lingo.
Haven't done Duolingo?
No, but I can tell you I watched some of the football games in Spanish.
You did? You're that good?
Well, like I want to know how they say intercepted or a flag.
You know all those words? That's really cool. Can you tell us anything in Spanish?
Well, like like Kiro as I want.
That's really good.
Yep. So I have certain people who I'll only text in Spanish.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really cool. And you can read what they're writing back?
Well, some will recognize some words.
And I think Colin's interest in Spanish really shows about bringing the person to the table. So when he was young, we wanted him included as much as possible, but he still needed support for, he had speech and language, he had some things that he needed. So he was in a school that started Spanish in kindergarten. And so we made the decision to pull him from Spanish so that he could work with the speech and language pathologist. So as he got older and we were heading to college and we said, what would you like to study? Because he audited classes at Edgewood College. He didn't have the opportunity to Spanish. So he made the decision to start to take some Spanish classes. And what's lovely is he's on a alumni group with Edgewood College. He went to the Cutting Edge program there, which is a Think College initiative for individuals. He leads sessions on Spanish. So with his peers, don't you, Colin?
Somebody just wrote in Spanish, I liked my presentation.
Oh, that was nice. Wasn't that nice?
You are really good at Spanish. That's amazing.
He's learning.
Cool. That is neat. Your life is so cool, Colin.
And I've also listened to some Milwaukee Brewer games in Spanish in the past.
Really? That's awesome, man. And you've met Will Allen. You know some cool people. I'm really jealous, Colin. Your life is awesome.
Well, he's retired now.
He is retired now, but he's a cool dude. That's awesome. All right. Well, next time I'm in Milwaukee, I've got a couple other questions. I've got Lynn, Tara, and Kara. What's your perspective on the BCBA licensing bill? And maybe I'll go in order. I'll go Lynn first.
I have not followed it, so I don't have a lot of, but I know that I support the knowledge base of BCBAs, and I would love to see them in schools. So on a more than what we have now, but we're going to have to do something to expand the networking because we don't have enough. So even if we said we'll have them in schools, we don't. Going back to Kara and talk about short workforce shortages, we'd have to do something about that. But I can't speak because I don't know enough about it.
Thanks, Lynn. Tara.
I mean, I'm all for quality ABA and anything we can do to systematize that and ensure that everybody's and the value of ABA. And so I think the more we can talk about it and the practices that we do and that the work that we do, anything we can do to support our behavior analysts in the fields is I'm all for. It's a little different in schools, and I think sometimes the licensure stuff gets a little messier in schools. And we've had lots of discussions in our MSBBA group about what it looks like and how it would apply to us. And a lot of it's more clinically based, but I'm all for supporting my practitioners in clinics and in homes and all of those places.
Thanks. And Kara, for you, are you familiar with the bill, or do you have any thoughts?
I'm not super familiar with the bill. I'm a genetic counselor professionally, and we went through licensure a few years ago. I do think that licensure elevates the profession, increases awareness about the profession, and certainly increases reimbursement, all of which are critical to help keep that positive momentum and encourage kind of backfilling this provider shortage. I certainly would be able to get behind any bill that elevated BCBAs.
Tara, there's one question for you in the chat. When you mentioned focusing on the masses, do you have any tips or ideas on how to maintain quality and implementation with turnover?
We experience a lot of turnover in education and short-staffed and all of those things. Some of what we've done, and it's still messy, and it's still, we're still working out some of that stuff, but we've done a lot of pre-recorded trainings so that as we onboard staff members, that we are trying to get them some basic groundwork in behavior principles and some of the practices that they would be supporting in classrooms and all of that. So it's not necessarily, we've done, part of that was just COVID, the COVID experience. We had hard to do ABA work when you're distance learning, but we spent that time developing training modules and making those available to our educational assistants and our teaching staff and as needed. And we're continually working on that. But I think some of those things are ways that we can, when we have that turnover, when you're onboarding staff members, if you have some of those things that are in place that you can say, hey, here's some of these resources, and then here's how you can check in with staff members, and then you can kind of value your staff time of like still making yourself available for questions and answers and all of that kind of stuff. But that foundational work can kind of be done individually by the new staff.
I love that. Yeah, developing standard work is so important. Really cool. All right. There's one more question. Lynn, it's for you. What's been the best part for you as a mom of sharing this journey with Colin?
Ooh, I'll start getting emotional, so Kara can relate to this probably, but we always had high expectations, and it is so rewarding to see that you did not have your high expectations high enough. I can't say enough high. Colin has surpassed. He is just, like I said, he's more social than we are. He has a rich social life. He's just an awesome person. I travel with him, and so when one of the things I'd say for those of you who work with young children, just to help parents, like, we don't know what to expect, so the fear is part of our journey, and so then you don't know what's going to happen at the other, when the adulthood is there, and it's just. Colin has surpassed my expectations. He's just a wonderful person. I enjoy him. anyway, so I don't want to get all emotional, but that's been awesome. That's just been awesome. It was a lot of time invested and it was painful, the journey in places, but the outcome has been wonderful. So Colin, you're a wonderful person.
Great. Colin, what does it feel like to hear that?
Probably emotional.
Well, I think you're pretty great too. I really appreciated having you on today. I asked you a lot of hard questions and you've been awesome. Those have been questions that would have been really hard for anyone to answer. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. I think we all learned a lot from you today. Anything else that you want to tell anybody today before we go?
You want to tell them about what's going on with the MLB lockout?
The players are locked out and their season's supposed to be starting soon.
I know the opener's on Erin's birthday usually. So, and I know she usually goes. So I think Erin's going to be bummed here.
It's not fun for me to know this.
So we actually
So
on
I kind of spent 2 days in the living room last week with the TV on and nothing happened. And I went to bed on Monday for 2 hours and I got up at 1 to turn the TV on because I thought there was going to be an update.
And nothing.
It was just a rerun from 1996.
Ah,
So it was on later in the afternoon.
He thought it was 1 a.m., but it was 1 p.m. He set his alarm and got up to see the update.
So
Colin loves sports.
I
Tell
went
him
back to, so
You went back to bed?
I went back to bed after that.
Colin, tell them, where did you spend your 30th birthday? What did we do for your 30th birthday? Colin loves sports.
Oh, we went back to the ball game in 2 years because I did not get to go in 2 years ago. It was a shortened season.
so it's an even bigger bummer because they should be opening up, huh? Hoping to go back.
Yep. So I have a game on hold right now. Hoping to see the Brewers play the Cubs at Wrigley.
Mhm. Yeah, Colin could talk to you for hours about
Finger-
sports.
Fingers crossed, Colin. Fingers crossed. We
Yeah,
break through here, right?
To see what happens next week.
All right. Well, I think that's the theme for today is we can all get along when we want something better for everybody else, right? All right. Well, thank you to all of our panelists, Lynn, Kara, Tara, everybody. Everybody's mentioning in the chat that this was really great. And I fully appreciate anyone who's always willing to get up and be vulnerable and share their stories. And it's been wonderful. So it sounds like we're going to take a little break. I'll let Erin jump in with next steps here. I'll hand it over to Erin.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again to all panelists. And thank you, Liz, for being our facilitator. It's not an easy topic to navigate all the time. So we really appreciate that. So rounds of applause for Liz. Really quickly, we are going to, I am going to leave the webinar link open. So for the lunch break, you can either log off and log back in and use the same link, or you can keep it open and just do whatever you like, go about having your lunch and whatnot. But again, thank you so much to everyone on the panel. Thank you, Tim, for kicking us off this morning and everything that you shared, and everyone for being a part of this wonderful event. I feel lots of love, and so I'm going to go have some lunch and feel good about it. So everybody take a break, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you at 1 o'clock.
And Colin, you don't have to come back at 1 o'clock. So you're done. Bye, Colin. Have fun in Indiana.
Bye.
Bye.